Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be comparing the Nike Metcon 7 to the Nike Zoom Metcon Turbo 2. So as always, I do have written content on both of these models. That is linked down there in the description below, so check that out if you want additional context on either of these shoes. And I have timestamped all the different sections for this video down below, so if you're in a rush or if you just want to learn about something specific about these models and how they compare, definitely check out those timestamps. Without further ado, let's dive into our first topic. So the first topic that I want to cover is major construction differences between each of these shoes. And I think this section is important because these differences will then correlate to how each shoe performs, its overall durability, and how it will fit and feel for your training. Now I've consolidated all the differences into 4 major differences. The first major difference is the midsole constructions used in each model. So in the Nike Metcon 7, we have a more formal traditional training shoe build, meaning we have like a formal midsole layer that extends the entirety of the shoe. That is this purple layer here. The midsole in the Nike Metcon 7 is built with the Nike React foam. Back here in the heel, we do have a hyperlift insert built into this model. So as opposed to the Metcon 5 and 6 that came with a separate hyperlift insert, this model has that TPU insert built into the heel to provide you with additional stability. In the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, we do not have a formal midsole layer. So all we have is the outsole layer here on the forefoot and heel, which is made out of different rubber materials, and then this rubber midfoot material. What gives this shoe its versatility and stability is not a midsole layer, it's actually the insole. And that brings us to our second difference, which is the insole constructions used in each of these shoes. In the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, the insole is what I would describe as like the nuts and bolts of the shoe. If you like this model, it's probably because of the insole. So the insole in the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2 is built with the Nike React foam. In this model, you also have a Zoom Air packet up here in the forefoot. This is designed to give you a little bit more pop when training on the forefoot in this model. Around the midfoot here, you do have a slightly more rigid material, so the React foam is a little bit more firm, so you do get a little bit of support with this model's insole. Now, if you take out the insole in the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, it's pretty much nothing. So you just have this like thin layer of rubber covering the heel and forefoot and this rubber wrap around the midfoot. That's also why I suggest if you have custom orthotics or insoles, probably looking into different models, because otherwise you'll have to layer your insoles, which could actually be limiting due to the limited upper volume in the shoe, or you'll have to put that insert and orthotic in and take out the insole, which is kind of pointless if you're going to invest that money into the shoe, because again, the insole in this model is what really gives it stability and versatility. So if you take that out for a custom orthotic or insole, you're not going to get as much out of this model. In the Nike Metcon 7, you have a removable insole. It is this thin foam insole. So if you do have custom orthotics or insoles, the Metcon 7 may be a better option to look into between these two shoes. The third major difference is the outsole constructions used in each model. So on the Nike Metcon 7, we have a full rubber outsole for the most part. We do have some grooves up here in the forefoot to give you a little bit more maneuverability. And then here on the midfoot, we do have some tapered layers here with different materials. These wrap up the medial and lateral side of the shoe to give you additional support for rope climbing. And then we also have this cutout down here on the heel where you can see the hyperlift insert through. It looks more like a weightlifting shoe in the context of the heel of the Nike Metcon 7. On the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, we have like this disassociated outsole construction, meaning the forefoot and heel are pretty much sitting separate from one another, split by this rubber material. Up here on the forefoot, we have a sticky rubber, and then back here on the heel, the rubber is a little bit more firm to give you a bit more stability. And then in the midfoot here, we have what feels like a rubber and TPU blend of material. It's basically designed to give you more maneuverability in the outsole, but also give you some rope climbing support and durability support. The fourth major difference between these shoes is the upper constructions and like their lacing and tongue construction. So in the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, we have a full mesh upper covering the forefoot. Now I do have some durability concerns with the upper in this model. I mentioned that in my full review, so definitely check that out if you're interested. Throughout the midfoot, we do have this like breathable external cage here that helps lock down the shoe. And then back here on the heel, we have a slightly higher boot compared to the React Metcon Turbo, and it's a little bit more rigid in nature. So it does lock down the heel pretty dang well compared to the React Metcon Turbo. The shoe's upper as a whole feels a bit more structured in nature compared to the React Metcon Turbo that featured more of like a mesh/knit blend of materials. Looking at the Nike Metcon 7, we have a chain link mesh upper that extends throughout the forefoot and the midfoot. We have some synthetic overlays up here on the toe box for additional durability. On the medial side of the midfoot, we have a rubber wrap that extends up the entirety of the shoe. This is to give you more bite when rope climbing and to prolong the shoe's overall durability. And then again, on the lateral side, we do have that extended outsole layer that wraps up. And then back here on the heel, we have layered materials to help give this boot more structure. Looking at the midfoot, we have 5 core eyelets that run up. We have 3 eyelets here on the lateral side that feature flywire, and then the tongue itself has this lace locking mechanism. So those are some of the major construction differences between each of these shoes. I will be doing a construction side by side later in this video, but now let's talk about the performance of each model. How does each model perform in different contexts? All right, so now let's answer the question, which model is better for lifting? So right out of the gate, I'm gonna say that I don't think stability or compression is gonna be an issue for most lifters in either of these models. So that being said, how can you differentiate which to go with for lifting? So I think if you are somebody on a weekly basis who wants a shoe for heavy lifting, but you also like to do some CrossFit workouts here and there, definitely go with the Nike Metcon 7. It is an overall, I think, stronger shoe for blending lifting and CrossFit together in regard to durability. Now, if you're somebody like myself who is in like an athletic training phase at the moment, where you're blending a lot of plyometrics with heavy lifts, the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2 is an awesome option to go with. The shoe feels very athletic in nature. That Zoom Air Packet gives you a nice pop in the forefoot, and as a whole, the stability in the shoe is pretty dang good. So which model is better for lifting? Both of the models have really good stability. I would say factor in how you train on a weekly basis in addition to your lifting and how you plan to use this shoe to make your call. If you're doing more functional fitness and CrossFit workouts blended with lifting, the Nike Metcon 7 can be an awesome bet. And if you're blending more athletic style training with your lifting, the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2 can be a really strong choice. All right, so now let's answer the question, which model is better for CrossFit? So if you're investing in one of these shoes, primarily for CrossFit workouts, which model should you go with? So if I had to pick one shoe overall for CrossFit, I would say probably Nike Metcon 7, and that's for 4 key reasons. Number 1, the stability of the shoe is pretty dang good. Number 2, the upper durability I think is just a little bit better. It has more features basically designed to withstand the demands of CrossFit workouts. Number 3, the shoe does a better job at rope climbing, so we do have better support here on the medial and lateral side of the shoe. And then number 4, its price point is a little bit better for the context of one shoe for tackling CrossFit workouts. The Nike Zoom Metcon Turbo 2 will work for CrossFit workouts, and I've had a lot of athletes reach out and say like they love the forefoot, for example, for double unders, and they like the maneuverability of the outsole and how it interacts with different WODs. But the reason I did not pick this shoe as my number 1 is number 1, the upper durability does concern me a little bit in the shoe, and then number 2, its price point is a little bit higher. So factor in that durability concern, and it kind of makes this shoe a little bit tougher to get behind if you're just going to be using them strictly for CrossFit workouts. Now, obviously, as time passes and we have more data points on this model's upper, hopefully my instance was just a one-off occasion because this shoe does really good in the context of CrossFit workouts. There are just a couple of little quirks with it that kind of make me hesitant to recommend it as my top choice. So the next question is, which model is better for versatile training? So versatile training includes things like agility training, plyometrics, HIIT training, basically workouts where you are blending in a bunch of athletic style training into one session. So both models will work, but if I had to pick one, I would go the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, and that's for 3 key reasons. Number 1, I really like the maneuverability of this shoe's outsole. Number 2, the Zoom Air Packet blended with that Nike React Foam gives this shoe a very lightweight and like very nice pop to it when you are jumping. So I do like the shoe a lot for plyometrics. And then number 3, I like the overall fit of this shoe. It feels very similar to a cleat or like a Nike Metcon 4. So it's very form-fitting on the foot and it feels very lightweight. Now, if you plan to use the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2 for versatile training, do not do what I did and make sure you're really tightening them up. Even if they feel tight, see if you can get them a little bit more tight through the midfoot so you're not sliding into the end of the toe box when you're doing things like broad jumps and box jumps. That's what I think caused these stress rips in this model. I'm currently in the midst of testing actually another Zoom Metcon Turbo 2 that is fresh, so I will have more data on that soon. So I would highly suggest doing that if you plan to invest in this model for versatile training. The Nike Metcon 7 will work for this style of training. What turns me off with this model is the heel construction. It's not the most forgiving for jumping, especially if you're doing primarily just athletic focused training. So while the Nike Metcon 7 works, it just doesn't feel as athletic in nature as the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2. Our next performance category is running. Which model is better? So when it comes to long runs and the Metcon 7 and the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, I compare their performance to like hitting a nail in with a wrench. Yeah, it'll get the job done, but it's not going to be the most comfortable or the most specific for your performance. So with both of these models, I would suggest keeping your runs shorter in length, so anywhere from like 2 miles max in both of these models. And when it comes to running in these shoes, Both will work for short distances and sprints. I do like the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2 a little bit better for sprint work, and that's just because of the maneuverability of the sole and that Zoom air packet. With the Nike Metcon 7, they work pretty well for sprints as well, but when decelerating, the heel is kind of annoying and kind of blocky. So with both of these shoes, while they'll both work for short runs, they're not going to be great options for long runs. And if you want a shoe for longer runs, longer than 5Ks, I would suggest looking into models that are a bit more specific in nature for running. But if you do like a more minimalist shoe and a more stable shoe, maybe they'll work for you. I just don't find them either to be that comfortable. So in regard to fit and sizing differences between the Metcon 7 and the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, I think most lifters and athletes should be safe going true to size in both of these models. Their lengths fit true, and their widths are what I would describe as like more neutral in width. So if you have a narrow, neutral, or slightly wider foot width, you should be safe going true to size in both of these models. And I've even had lifters in the community reach out and say like they even have wider feet and they fit true in both of these shoes. But if you are nervous about having a wider foot and the fit in both of these shoes, you can go up a half size, and that should be a little bit better for you. What I would suggest though is being very conscious of having heel slip issues in both of these models. That's going to be more prone to happening in the Metcon 7 because the boot is a bit more low profile in design, whereas in the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, this boot does come up a bit higher and it's a bit more rigid and it hugs the heel a little bit more. Now, one special sizing thought is that if you invest in the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, you might want to wear longer socks for your first couple of sessions or even the first 1 or 2 weeks when you're breaking them in. You can get a little bit of rub in this model under the malleolus just because the boot does come up higher and provide more ankle support. Overall though, I think most lifters and athletes should be safe going true to size in both of these shoes, and they both fit pretty athletic in nature with lower upper volumes. All right guys, now let's compare the weight, heel to toe drop, and insole in the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2 and the Nike Metcon 7. For my size 10 model in the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, we have a weight of 12.7 ounces. In the Nike Metcon 7 for my size 10, we have a weight of 12.3 ounces. I find that kind of ironic because the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2 is marketed to be like this lightweight minimalist shoe. In the Nike Metcon 7, we have a heel to toe drop of 4 millimeters. And then in the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, there is no specified heel to toe drop, but Nike support team said that it's likely 4 millimeters. And then in regard to the insoles of each of these shoes, the insole in the Nike Zoom Metcon Turbo 2 is this thicker insole. And then we also have a removable insole in the Nike Metcon 7, and that is this thin foam insole. All right, so now let's do a construction side by side of the Metcon 7 and the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2. So up here on the toe box, we have an extended outsole layer that wraps up on the Metcon 7. It's a little bit wider in nature compared to the extended outsole wrap here on the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2. Looking at the toe boxes, so we have a full mesh upper here in the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, and we do have some internal toe guards, which I do talk about in depth in my review of this model. In the Nike Metcon 7, we have a synthetic overlay here to prevent any breakdown of this upper, and we have a chain link mesh that extends the whole forefoot of the Metcon 7. Looking at the upper constructions, so we have this mesh upper here in the forefoot in the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2. We have this external cage here. This is very breathable and see-through, so as you can see, it does have some layering to it. And then back here on the heel, we have a bit more of like a structured material and a slightly thicker material compared to the mesh up here in the forefoot. Looking at the Nike Metcon 7's upper, we have a chain link mesh that goes through the forefoot, through the midfoot here, and then back here in the heel, we do have some beefed up materials as well to help lock down that heel. Looking at the heel constructions, in the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, we do have a plastic TPU clip here for handstand push-up support. And looking at the Metcon 7 here, we do have a TPU layer here and that hyperlift insert for additional handstand push-up support. Looking at the midsole constructions, in the Nike Metcon 7, we have a full Nike React foam that extends the entirety of the shoe's midsole. And then looking at the Zoom Metcon Turbo, once again, we do not have a formal midsole layer. Flipping over the shoes and looking at the outsoles. So in the Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, we have 2 different rubber textures and then a different material here on the midfoot. Up here on the forefoot, this is more of a sticky rubber, and then back here on the heel, it's more of a firm and dense rubber for lifting support. And then looking at the midfoot, this material feels to be like rubber and TPU, so it does feel a little bit more rigid in nature, but it does have some bite and grip for rope climbs. So that extends from the midfoot up here on the medial side and then over here on the lateral side as well. Looking at the Nike Metcon 7's outsole, we have a full rubber outsole with some grooves up here in the forefoot. We have a cutout back here where you can see the hyperlift insert, and then we have this midfoot material here that is also rubber, but it wraps up the shoe to give you more additional rope climbing support. On the medial side of the shoe, we have a full rubber guard that wraps up this model. Looking at the midfoot constructions, we have 5 eyelets in both shoes. In the Nike Metcon 7, we have flywire here on the lateral side, outside with a lace lock mechanism on the tongue and a slightly thicker tongue that is gusseted. In the Nike Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, we have 5 eyelets that run up. These sit internal on that midfoot cage, and we have a lightweight and breathable tongue with additional loops like the Nike Metcon 7. There is no lace lock in this model, and this model's tongue is gusseted as well. And then looking at the insoles of each model, in the Nike Metcon 7, we have a removable foam insole. So as you can see, as I struggle to get this insole out, it is a thin foam insole. We have a little bit of an anatomical curve here for the arch of the foot. And then looking at the insole of the Nike Zoom Metcon Turbo 2, we have this thicker insole made out of Nike React foam, and we have a Zoom air packet up here in the forefoot. The midfoot of this insole is a bit more rigid in nature, so you do get a little bit of support with this insole when you're training. And then overall, I think that's pretty much the meat and potatoes of the constructions of these shoes. If you have additional questions on the constructions of either of these models, drop a comment down below. Alright guys, that wraps up this comparison of the Nike Metcon 7 versus the Nike Zoom Metcon Turbo 2. Both of these models have their own lists of pros and cons, and each shoe has its own list of strengths and weaknesses in the gym for different training contexts. If you have a question on either of these shoes or which would be right for you based on your training needs, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always guys, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.